great. I'm gonna move this one over here. So yeah, hi, hi everybody. Thank you for being here. Thanks, James. Um, yeah, today we'll be talking about dev and design, the connection between the design process and the development process, and about the different point of view that designers and developers have. We'll look at the problems and maybe on some solutions to hopefully improve your workflow in the future. But before we begin, let me introduce myself. Um, my name is Amit Sheen. I've been a web developer for just over a decade now. I'm the most of the time, most of my career, I was working with startups, being a part of the startup nation here. And I've worked with a lot of companies, lots of technologies, ideas, lots of opinions, and a lot of designers. I do mainly front end, so I often worked very closely with the designer, and I've worked with them all: digital designers, old school print designers, good designers and bad designers, juniors, seniors, everybody. And I came over some issues or problems, but over time I developed some methods or tools to help me understand them better and to better explain myself to the other side. Um, so what is the problem? The problem is that we have a different point of view. Just like the nice image we see here on the screen, we look at the same thing, but from a different perspective. And that's creating these issues. 2 years ago, I actually started teaching a course in Tel Aviv's University design department about this topic. The course is called When Design Hits Reality, because most of the collisions between designers and developers are naturally at this point where the design process ends and goes into development. So I'm not going to talk about everything I cover in that course, but I will talk about some of the points, the differences between developers and designers that reinforce those different point of views. So we'll talk about responsiveness and units, size units, fonts and formats, dynamic content. I will explain what each of them means, browser compatibility, and animation and interactions. So let's begin, and we're going to start with something big: responsiveness. So the concept of responsiveness is very simple. I have a website. I want it to look good on my computer, my smartphone, my tablet, and sometimes even on my smartwatch. And there are methods to deal with responsiveness. So today we'll talk about breakpoints and fluid design. Now, if you're a designer and working on Figma or Zeppelin or XD or whatever, you are probably working with breakpoints. It's easier to think of screen sizes as something static. But when you look at responsiveness, you don't just want it to look good on your phone. It should look good on all phones and all tablets and all screens. A smartphone, for example, can be 320 pixel width or 375 pixel width or 400 something. Computer screens can have pretty much any resolution and any aspect ratio. So breakpoints are great for designers, but on the development side, things are a lot more fluid. Furthermore, as a developer, we think in components. Theoretically, one component can have one set of breakpoints, a second component can have only one breakpoint, and some component will have no breakpoints. And the developer job is to take all of that into account. Uh, the second thing about responsiveness is the use of measuring units. Again, many designers, specifically those who came from print, but not just, think of units as something absolute, like pixel, inches, centimeters. But as developers, we have units like percentage or VW or EM that helps us deal with things like screen width or screen height or font size. Now, I'm not going to get to the question of when to use what unit because that's a different issue. I will say that both designers and developers should know the different types of the units and use them correctly. Don't use only one unit or one type of unit. Use it according to the components, to the specific component needs. So to sum up the responsiveness, if you are a designer who works with breakpoints, it's okay. Just remember that your design should look good on all sizes and not just on the sizes you are working with. Think of components as individual elements and adjust each component to the proper breakpoint because each component has its own life. And define the midpoint between each breakpoint. The midpoint, when I say midpoint, like if you're a designer and you are working on Figma or something and you have a mobile design and a desktop design, so the mobile can be 375 pixel width, the desktop could be 450, 1440 pixel width, but the midpoint is at what pixel in the middle is the component switches from the desktop view to the mobile view, and this midpoint again it can vary from component to component. So if you are a developer, yep. So first, understand the technical limitations. Put it in quotes that the designers have. Figma and XD are not home, and as we said, designers have to think of screens as something very static. The second thing, try to get the final design at the component level. Again, make the designer think of the component as an individual part and get the design at the component level. And the third thing is get a specific list of all the breakpoints and midpoints for each component. If there are any, if it's different, so it's better to have a full list. And I hope that by doing that, you will have less problems with responsiveness. So the next thing I want to talk about are formats. I am talking about images, of course, maybe icons sometimes. So there is a lot of image formats out there like JPEG and PNG and SVG. And now we have new and improved formats like WebP and AVIF. And it is important. Formats are important. The use of the wrong format can lead to a heavier image and can affect the image loading time, which in turn can affect SEO ranking and caching. So first of all, when it comes to format, if you're a designer or a developer, get to know the new image formats and use them because they are supported already. And two, set in advance, you and the other party, the formats you're going to use. Don't get a format that you don't know in surprise. Get everything set in advance. And the third thing is set a clear resolution convention. I'll explain. The designer need to know in what resolution to export the final images, obviously. And sometimes it's not simple. It's not that simple because maybe the image changes its aspect ratio, or you use different images for different breakpoints. Again, there are ways and methods to deal with all of that today, and you just need to clarify everything in advance with both sides, both design and development. And formats and fonts. The problem with fonts is that it's very easy to fall in love with the font, and then you want to use it in every project, which is okay, but like formats, fonts may have the same problems as images. Some fonts can be very heavy, slow down the page loading time, and sometimes create a flash of unstyled content. So first thing, when you're working with fonts, and it is for both designers and developers, prefer common web fonts. They are lighter, load faster. Most of the time, they are already cached in the browser. It's better if you use, it's just better. If you do use custom fonts, use strong CDN. It's very important. The second thing about fonts, font sizes and colors can also affect the ranking. If your text is too small or the contrast of the background, the contrast to the background color is not high enough, your content is considered as not readable. So pay attention to proper font sizes and colors. Again, both from the design aspect and the development aspect. And the last thing you need to learn about fonts is just something you need to learn to live with is font family and size can and will be changed by the user, either by the browser settings or through the accessibility menu. This is just something you need to know, and you need to be prepared to these changes. Your design and your code should take into account that a lot of people may use bigger or different fonts. It also relates to what we talked about earlier about relative size units, and it's just one more reason to be working with proper relative units where needed, of course. And it also brings us to the next topic, which is dynamic content. So designers has a tendency to work with short little headlines, tidy text, all in the same length. But in real life, the content is very often entered by the user. If it's in tables or testimonials, for example, or comments, and you should always take into account, both in design and in code, that the length of the text will change. It happens in every user-driven content, again, like comments or testimonials and so on. It happens in translate content. Every headline, it's like 2 words in English, 4 words in Italian, and 3 words in Hebrew. It always changes. And also with numbers, amounts, dates, they always take a different length. To avoid these problems, first thing you need to do is to have a few design variations with several text lengths. If you have a component with text, I don't know, it can be headers of a table or testimonials with different lengths. If you have a couple of components, have one with a short component, short text, one with long text, and so on. Have a few variations of design. And the second thing is to set a proper restrictions and guidelines for dynamic content. For example, if it's a user input, you can restrict it to be up to 50 characters or up to 500 characters. I don't know. It can be a guideline for a headline. If it overflows one line because you don't want it to be over one line, add ellipsis or add something. I don't know. You can add any restriction or any guidelines you want, but you need to put it. There was a beep. So that beep brings us to the next topic, which is browser compatibility. There's actually a lot of browsers today, and I'm not going to talk a lot about browsers compatibility because this is, again, one of those things you just need to know about and to be prepared to. Browsers display objects differently from each other. It's just the way it is. And yes, there is a lot of ways to reset and normalize these differences and deal with browser compatibility. You just need to learn them and know what to avoid, like native drop-downs menus, for example, or any native user input. But my tip here is determine, again, in advance, what browsers should be supported, and what operation systems, and what are the limits. Like, for example, if you have a grid design, so you know that you can't support Internet Explorer 10, and if you need to support Internet Explorer 10, don't have a sophisticated grid design. So it's just something that you need to know about. And the last topic I want to talk about is animations and interactions. In today's web, I love animation, and in today's web, everything is very animated. Things don't just happen anymore; they fade out, fade in. When you click on a button, there's a little animation. Everything lives. Some designers think about it in the design process, and sometimes it's the developer who will who will add the animation. But it's better when it comes from both. When you start a new project, sit down with the other party. If you're a designer, sit down with the developer. If you're a developer, sit down with the designer and talk about animation, discuss component transitions, like how it will open, how it will close, go in, go out. If you have a decorative animations on your website, talk about it. How do you want it to act? How do you want it to interact with the user? Spinners and loaders, make them your own. If you're a designer, don't use just any regular spinner. Make your logo spin, or make your animation logo have some kind of animation. Add the loader to add your brand color to the loader, like pop-ups, toast messages, everything that can be animated should be animated, and you should sit down and talk about it again in advance. This will help you coordinate expectations and get a more vibrant, beautiful website and a better workflow for you. So yeah, I could go on and on, but I only have so much time. And so I wanted to sum it all up into three small points, which are the most important things I'm trying to convey here. So first, and the most important one, maintain direct and open content. Talk to the other side, ask questions, ask for their opinion, discuss things like responsiveness, animations, formats, and again, everything in advance, please. And if you are already talking to the other side, use the correct terminology. Learn to speak the correct language. If you're a developer, get to know some of the terms and words designers use. And if you're a designer, do the same. Learn the difference between margin and padding, or the difference between border and stroke, and so on. It will help the connection between the designer and the developer. And the third thing, and we have to remember that we are all in it together. We all have the same goal, the same boss most of the time. We have the same objectives. Fighting won't get us anywhere. So yeah, that is me. Thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, now's the time.
Yeah, no, I don't see any questions, Amit, but if anyone has any questions, you will get Amit's contact details in the email after the event. But that was amazing, Amit. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure both designers and developers found that useful. So thank you so much. And again, you will receive an email with this. With the link to this presentation a few days after the event. So thanks again, Amit. It was nice to have you as a speaker.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Elad. So Elad is a web developer who specializes in CSS and HTML design, and he's already presented at a few months ago at Tech Italia, dedicated to HTML and CSS. So he is also from Israel, and Elad, the stage is yours. So if you want to say something more about yourself.
Okay, let's start. We will start.